My name is Jenna, and I've always been a dreamer. Growing up in a small town, my world was full of simple joys, lazy afternoons, cozy bookshops, and hours spent with Jason, my childhood best friend. We were inseparable back then, sharing secrets and adventures that only kids could dream up. But life had its way of pulling us apart. After high school, Jason moved to the city to study law, and I stayed behind, working at the local gallery and figuring out what I wanted from life. We lost touch, as people often do. Years later, my life looks different. I recently started dating Nate, one of the most exciting people I've ever met. Nate is the type of guy who commands attention the moment he walks into a room. Confident, adventurous, and always the life of the party. He makes me laugh like no one else, and his unpredictability keeps things interesting. But everything changed 3 weeks ago when Jason walked back into my life. It happened at a mutual friend's wedding. I was sipping champagne, trying to ignore the ache in my feet from the high heels I regretted wearing, when I saw him. Jason looked taller than I remembered, with a sharp suit and a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. His dark hair was neatly combed back, and his green eyes still had that thoughtful look I used to know so well. He spotted me almost instantly, and when our eyes met, it felt like time folded in on itself. "Jenna?" he said, smiling as he approached. His voice was deeper now, but still familiar. "Jason!" I set my glass down and hugged him, overwhelmed by a rush of nostalgia. It's been forever. As we talked, it felt as if no time had passed. He told me about his career as a lawyer in the city, and I shared stories about my gallery work. Somewhere between the laughter and catching up, I realized how much I had missed him. Jason was still Jason, steady, kind, and easy to talk to. When Nate joined us later, Jason's smile faltered for just a second, though he quickly recovered. Nate was his usual charming self, joking about how he couldn't wait to steal me away to the dance floor. Jason smiled politely, but I noticed the way his eyes flicked toward me, as if he was trying to read something in my expression. Over the next few weeks, Jason and I started meeting up more often. It felt natural to reconnect, especially since Nate and Jason were close friends. The three of us occasionally hung out together, but it was the moments Jason and I spent alone, over coffee or walks in the park, that stood out to me. Jason was different from Nate in every way. Where Nate was bold and spontaneous, Jason was thoughtful and attentive. He remembered small things, like how I loved lavender tea, or the way I always tucked my hair behind my ear when I was deep in thought. With Jason, I felt seen. But it wasn't until one quiet evening that things shifted between us. We were sitting on a park bench, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Jason had invited me out for a stroll, and we'd been talking about everything and nothing. There was a pause in the conversation, and I turned to find him watching me, his expression unusually serious. "Jenna," he began, his voice low, "I've been wanting to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. The way he was looking at me made my breath catch. "I've liked you for as long as I can remember," he confessed. "Back when we were kids, I didn't know how to say it. And when I saw you with Nate, I thought maybe I'd lost my chance. But I can't keep pretending. I just needed you to know." His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I didn't know what to say. A part of me had always wondered if Jason felt something for me, but hearing it out loud was different. It stirred something deep inside me, something I wasn't ready to face. "I don't know what to say, Jason," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm with Nate." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." That night, I couldn't sleep. Jason's confession replayed in my mind, and I started to question everything. I cared about Nate, but our relationship often felt like a whirlwind, exciting but chaotic. Jason, on the other hand, felt like home. The next time I saw Nate, I couldn't hide my inner turmoil. He noticed right away, of course. "Hey," he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, debating whether to tell him about Jason. In the end, I decided against it. I didn't want to hurt Nate, not yet. Not when I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. Jason had given me space, but his presence lingered in my thoughts. Then, one evening, everything unraveled. Nate and I were at dinner, celebrating his promotion. He was in high spirits, joking with the waiter and telling stories that had me laughing despite my conflicted emotions. But then, casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he said something that froze me in place. "You know, when Jason first told me he liked you, I couldn't believe it. He's not the type to go after what he wants, so I figured I'd step in." I stared at him, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What?" Nate chuckled, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah, he mentioned it once years ago, back when we first became friends. I guess I thought it was just a phase. Anyway, I liked you too, so I figured I'd make my move." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Jason had liked me all along, and Nate had known. Not only had he known, but he had deliberately pursued me, taking advantage of Jason's hesitation. The realization made my chest tighten with anger and betrayal. "You knew?" I asked, my voice shaking. Nate's smile faded, replaced by confusion. "What's the big deal? It's not like he ever did anything about it." I pushed my chair back, the sound scraping loudly against the floor. "The big deal is that you lied to me. You used Jason's feelings against him. How could you do that?" That night, I couldn't face Nate. I left the restaurant without another word, my mind racing. Nate's betrayal wasn't just about Jason, it was about trust. He had made choices that hurt both Jason and me, and I couldn't ignore that. I found myself at Jason's apartment, my heart pounding as I knocked on his door. When he opened it, his eyes widened in surprise. "Jenna? What's wrong?" I stepped inside, my emotions spilling over. "Nate knew, Jason. He knew how you felt about me, and he still pursued me." Jason's face hardened, a flicker of pain crossing his eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Everything feels like a lie." Jason hesitated before pulling me into a hug. It was the kind of hug that made me feel safe, even when the world was falling apart. "Take your time, Jenna," he said softly. "You don't have to decide anything right now." In the days that followed, I distanced myself from both men. I needed clarity, space to figure out what I truly wanted. Nate called and texted, apologizing and trying to explain, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Jason, true to his nature, gave me room to breathe, only checking in occasionally to see how I was doing. Eventually, I realized the answer wasn't about choosing between them. It was about choosing myself, what I deserved, what I needed. Nate's betrayal had opened my eyes, not just to his flaws, but to the importance of honesty and respect in any relationship. And Jason. Jason was everything I hadn't allowed myself to see. When I finally reached out to Jason, it wasn't with certainty about the future, but with a promise to explore what could be. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking a step towards something real. And that, I realized, was where love truly begins.